Well, thank you for being with us on this special edition here on the eve of Holocaust Memorial Day in Israel. Well, we've just been watching the official ceremony at i24, the memorial in Jerusalem, and we saw the speeches here of President Shimon Peres, the very heartfelt, emotional speech from the president, and the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu taking a slightly different tone than the president did. I'd like to go around here. We're joined by a panel of experts here to discuss the events of to discuss the bigger picture here, and especially some of the implications of the words of our Prime Minister here. I'm joined by Mr. Zam here. Tell me, Prime Minister Netanyahu's tone was fairly clear. It was full of warning. Basically, it's issuing warnings to the world of what could be, what was, and what could be again. What's your take on his tone here in the speech?
First of all, Mr. Netanyahu is really a very, very bad historian, because looking backwards, that's always easy. And if I think of the Holocaust, and the essence of the Holocaust is the industrial destruction of a people with an ideology. That's what it's all about. Not what happened before that, killing here and there a few Jews. That happened during 2,000 years of history. That's nothing new. But the decision by Hitler to kill systematically all the Jews was taken only in 1941 sometime. And it was finally decided at the Wannsee Conference in 1942. So how can Netanyahu's, the Prime Minister, say that already in 1933 everybody should have seen what would happen, that there's a straight line and all that? he really doesn't convince me. And then he became very political, and that is politics.
Speaking of his political angle there, Mr. Sheftel, yes. Tell us, do you believe it's his duty as the Prime Minister of Israel to paint these issues in the light of the Holocaust here as a warning, especially Iran? What's your take on that?
No question whatsoever, and I totally disagree with Mr. Zamir. Netanyahu is a very, very good historian.
Mr. Zam, you're referring to here.
Yes, yeah. And the Nazis spoke way before January 1942 about total destruction of the European Jewry. For instance, in his famous speech in January 1939, in the Reichstag, told Adolf Hitler, Yimach Shmo v'zichro, that if the international Jewry will drag again the nations of Europe to another war, it will be the total and complete destruction of Judaism first and foremost. And it was not the first time he said it in these blunt, explicit words. Now, there is not the slightest difference between the Iranian regime and the Nazi regime, as far as the will to destroy and to exterminate the 6.5 million Jews in the state of Israel. And it is the lesson from the Holocaust that we should take seriously such open threats, unequivocal threats to eliminate, to murder, industrialized way by atomic nuclear bombs, the 6.5 million Jews of the state of Israel. And there is no better opportunity to do so than in the day we memorize the Holocaust.
I tend to agree with my friend here. I think there are two different things, and bringing up current day events actually takes down the whole notion of the Holocaust. The Holocaust happened as a standalone. The Holocaust was, as we said, an industrial organization that was killing Jews like a machine. And all they had to do is figure out how this machine works. And as soon as it did, I'll just voice an opinion regarding the mixing of today's current dangers, which is Iran and the many bombs and all the threats, which have to be taken extremely seriously, and everything has to be done to prevent it. However, putting that in the same context with this holy day where we're talking about the Holocaust and its aftermath is, to me, not the right thing to do. It actually cheapens the Holocaust in a sense, because if you say that the Iranians are like the Germans, then it makes it not so serious. And
as far as they wish to exterminate
the wish to killing
Jews,
Jews, the wish to killing Jews has been for 4,000 years. The Jews have always been seen as a plague, as a disaster. And yes, I'll finish 1 second. Yes, Hitler and the others have been speaking about the Jews for years, and I mean the world Jewry, etc. But the actual meeting after the Wannsee conference made it an industry of killing Jews, and that is the difference, and that is not happening today.
Well, we'll come back. We'll have more time here to discuss this. Right now, we're going to go to our correspondent, Shachar Peled, in Jerusalem. Shachar, are you there? Shachar,
yes,
hi.
good evening.
Thanks for joining us again from the ceremony in Jerusalem there. Tell us again, now that the ceremony's taken place, what's the scene like there? What exactly took place?
Well, the ceremony is just over. Tomorrow there will be more ceremonies and services across the country in schools, in military bases, and in all sorts of organizations. There will be a moment of silence and commemoration, and also wrestling here in Yad Vashem, alongside with the reading of the victims' names here and in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. But what's very important to emphasize about this year's theme is that it's about Jews on the edge in 1944, between annihilation and liberation. So on the one hand, it marks the 70th anniversary of the deportation and murder of Hungarian Jews during the war. But also the liberation of several camps, concentration camps, and countries from the regime of the Nazis, and it marks the beginning of several steps towards hope. The date itself of the Remembrance Day, anchored in 1953 by David Ben-Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, relates both to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and the Israeli Independence Day. So it marks the transition from tragedy to hope.
Well, tomorrow's events, Shachar, there's a national moment of silence in the morning and some other high-profile speeches. Isn't that right?
Excuse me, I couldn't hear you.
Tomorrow's events, there's a national moment of silence in the morning, and then other speeches by the Prime Minister, some high-profile events tomorrow as well.
Yes. Absolutely. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister and the President will say their words again, once again emphasizing the threats that are over Israel today, saying that Israel must continue to remain strong and keep its safety and security over its people to prevent from history repeating itself.
Well, thank you very much from Jerusalem, Shachar Peled. Well, back to our panel here. Mr. Zam, I believe we're circle had come back around to you here. Let's speak about this, the connection to modern events here, and especially perhaps your take and your connection to European media and how they are looking at events surrounding the Holocaust today versus the Israeli narrative today.
Right now, I'm in between you two. Of course, if Iran would throw an atom bomb at Israel and 6.5 million Jews would be killed, you can call it another Holocaust. That's not my main point. For me, every day, as a German correspondent, as a German living in Israel, every day is Holocaust Day. And I deal with the subject from morning till night, every day since 40 years since I'm living here.
You're saying this is imposed on you as a German in Israel?
No. Simply by being a German and not hiding it, telling everybody, I am a German. People come up to me. It can be survivors of the Holocaust, or it can be people dealing with the subject, or I read books. I'm interested in films on the subject. I watched the Demjanjuk trial, of course, and was there, etc. So I would say it's a natural thing. Being a German living in Israel, you cannot evade it if you're serious. Now, my problem is not, don't misunderstand me, Iran throwing an atom bomb on Israel. My problem is much more the ideology behind it, the denial of Holocaust by Ahmadinejad, the charter of the Hamas. Now I go even a step further than Mr. Netanyahu. The whole ideology, what I hear in the Arab and see in the Arab media, the hatred And I think hatred is the most important word in this whole subject.
But you're turning it only to the Arab world. The problem
Right now, it's the Arab world, which is
the entire
again,
world, except maybe America, has turned. They're turning anti-Israel into anti-Semitism, and that is not only in Arab countries. That's happening.
You are absolutely right. And here you asked me about Germany. You know, the Germans will never forgive the Jews the Holocaust.
Yeah.
That is a famous quote I just quoted. And just imagine, had the Jews not gone like sheep to the gas chambers, had they defended themselves?
How could
they could have blown themselves
You
up
are
in the
talking about
buses, etc., like we have here.
You're talking about two thinkings in Israel. There's one, the Holocaust, as you said, sheep to the slaughter, but there's a bigger one. We live on the idea of Mordechai Anilevich, of what happened in the Warsaw Ghetto. And while it's a very small piece of resistance, in which in a bunch of Jews, young men and women said, we will die because we realize everyone's going to die, but we will take people with us. And you have to understand, I grew on the Shomer Hatzair kibbutz. For me, the Holocaust was divided into two, to these strange and misunderstood people who we didn't actually get, that came from over there. And then we understood the strength of the fighting against the Germans. And the ethos is very problematic. One has to put both of them together, but what Ben Gurion said...
I just want to take exception from what Mr. Zama said. The Jews could not defend themselves, simply because the Jews could not get weapons to defend themselves. The Jews were totally and completely helpless. The Warsaw Ghetto revolt was held when the Jews had something like 500 revolvers and less than 10 machine guns. And you cannot defend 500,000 people with few hundred revolvers and few machine guns.
Mr. Sheftel, let me divert us here for a moment.
Mr. Sheftel, I have to answer that.
But do it quickly.
One short answer.
Yeah.
You are absolutely right. But the defenseless Palestinian, for example, when they start fighting here, they blow themselves... Wait,
yes, but
I don't want to compare.
Yeah.
They blow themselves up in buses.
Because they have a murderous establishment which supplies them with the explosive to blow themselves. The Jews didn't have this explosive.
And they didn't want to do it like that, and they didn't do it like that.
We're here to talk about the Holocaust.
Do it because they didn't have the explosive.
You're
I'm
escaping
sure
from
if they would have the explosive, they would do it.
Okay.
Mr. Sheftel, let me put something to you. You are known for having referred to the Palestinian leader Abu Mazen as Adolf.
Abu Adolf Mazen.
Exactly.
Abu Adolf Mazen.
Explain your
Why are we
take on
doing
this.
this now? This is
very, very simple. Abu Adolf Mazen is the only person on earth that earned a doctorate degree for one of the most vicious books ever been written on earth.
Gentlemen, I disagree to this conversation.
Please don't shut my mouth.
No, let's talk about the Holocaust. Yoram,
I was asked a question,
I don't
and
think
I'm
that's the right
answering the
direction.
question, and
Don't
please, don't scream at me.
Let's connect it to today's comments by Abbas about the Holocaust.
No, you ask me why, to explain why do I call Mahmoud Abbas as Abu Adolf Mazen, and I said because he's the only person on earth that earned doctorate degree for saying that the 1 million Jews, 1 million only, that were slaughtered in the Second World War, it was a joint venture between the Nazis and the Zionists, between the Nazis and the Zionists, in order to justify Jewish claim to have a Jewish state after the Holocaust.
Today, though?
And for this, red communist anti-Semites gave him a doctorate degree. Therefore, he is Abu Adolf Mazen.
Well, let's return to the topic at hand here. Let's talk about Abu Mazen's statements today, for example. President Abbas addressed the Holocaust.
He didn't renounce his book. He didn't give back his doctorate degree, which he got for denying the Holocaust.
Excuse me.
As long as he wouldn't do this,
Mr.
his apology is empty words.
Mr. Sheftel.
Empty words.
Mr. Sheftel. We're talking about about a holy day.
I was
which we have
asked
to-
a question,
No problem.
and I
okay.
answered it.
No
That's
problem.
all.
You did correct, except if you can lower your voice, it's much better. We don't have to scream today. This day is a holy day. It's a holy day because we have to understand what evil was all about. We have to understand why good people didn't do good things, why there is only such a small number of righteous Gentiles. What is that all about? But bringing it to the level of speaking about Abu Mazen, etc., diminishes the importance of this day. In this day, bad people took the idea of killing other people. And by the way, Netanyahu was correct. 60 million people died in this war. The Holocaust was terrible, and it can never be forgotten. That was part of this terrible thing. Russians died, and Poles died. Many other people died because the Germans thought they were a super race. And now we get to the point. The Germans actually believed that everyone below them was nothing. And they were the only ones to decide life and death. In this day, remember the Holocaust, it's not even an argument what's happening currently in the Ukraine or what's happening in Lithuania or Russia, other people where the neo-Nazi movements are growing. Yes, they're growing and it can be discussed. On this day, we have to understand what evil is and how you fight evil. Evil is absolutely what Satan did. The German evil never looked dangerous. I mean, the people, when you look at Eichmann and others, they look like
What about
school
today?
teachers.
You're known for hunting neo-Nazis
Yes, and
essentially
I'd
today.
be happy to talk about that, but I want to explain that today's neo-Nazis take the overall ideas, but they play games with it. The idea of destroying Israel doesn't come into their mind. They say, yes, we hope all the Jews would die, but the neo-Nazi movement is based currently on all the outer elements of the neo-Nazis, such as the Sieg Heil and the swastika, etc. But in their mind today, the big enemy for the neo-Nazis are the foreigners, and all foreigners. Since there are almost no Jews left in Europe to be foreign, it's now everyone else. And the neo-Nazi movement is growing by leaps and bounds because of one thing: they hate the new immigrants, and many of them are Muslims. So now you
What
can
about
hate.
their presence in the United States and the manifestation of the Ku
By
Klux
the way, I
Klan?
must take exception again of any comparison between the death of 20 million Russians and 6 million Jews. 20 million
no
Russians,
comparison.
20 million Russians died because of the pact between Molotov and Ribbentrop. Otherwise, the Second World War, doubtfully if it would have started, because Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf that Germany will never repeat the mistake of the First War to fight at the same time at two fronts. Therefore, he secured the Eastern Front with the pact of Ribbentrop and Molotov. Therefore, the Russians are to blame for the Second World War exactly to the
Yoram,
same
you're taking
degree.
history. I mean, you're
Exactly
talking.
to the same degree as the Nazis. And
Let's
by the
place
way,
the blame unnecessarily.
the difference between
Zahn.
the communists and the Nazis is very, very
These
slight.
are empty
The gulags,
slogans.
the gulags.
Why are we talking about the
I'd like
gulags
to-
on the
I'd like to come back to
Holocaust?
Mr. Zahn for a
I
The
would
moment.
like
gulags
to-
and the concentration camps don't have, except the gas chambers, much difference.
I would like to get back to our
Yes,
subject.
please, bring us back to that.
The point is, 60 million killed people during World War II. War is war. And I don't accept that Germans say that the British did a Holocaust in Dresden, for example, because they bombed the city. I wouldn't say that. The main point, and I return to what I said before, the main point is there was an ideology, an idea, a crazy idea that people, because of their race, which is a relatively new invention, by the way, had to be killed. As you said, you mentioned, the Germans feel that they are the higher race, etc. Yes, okay. But the idea that people have to get killed, children, older people, etc., only because of their race, no other reason. That is special about the Holocaust, and there's nothing to discuss it.
Yeah.
Beyond that. And war, and if the Russians started and the Nazis started, I don't believe in Hitler, what he said, as you do. Sorry. These people were evil by inventing this
A
kind
point we
of
can all
ideology.
agree on.
And
absolutely.
doubt
it's
about
interesting
it.
that they
No doubt
came
about it.
from middle class. I mean, there wasn't a bunch of evil people. People in Germany were accepting this guy with the small mustache and the crazy hair and his rantings and ravings,
Right.
they actually saw him as something that would get them back into
How
power.
did the masses end up following this man? Mr. Sheftel, what's your take on that? Why were the masses so eager to follow someone who, in our words here, had such extreme views?
Look, I think the German defeat in the First War and the so-called promise of Hitler to revive the German strength, the German pride, and to take revenge of those people who stabbed in the back Germany while she was fighting for its survival and so on. This kind of rhetoric fell on quite acceptable ears of millions of Germans, and this how Hitler came to power. B, of course, Germany was in a terrible financial and economic situation. When Hitler came to power, there were 6 million unemployed, unheard of, and this also helped, I would say, a social demagogy that he used.
Took advantage of the climate
Yes,
that existed.
and by
at
the way,
time.
we shall never forget that he insists, and especially Goebbels, to explain that the Nazism is the German interpretation to socialism. We should never
I want to
forget
add
it.
something about
They
Hitler.
always
Give us your closing thoughts,
insisted.
Mr. Saba.
They
We're running
always
out of time here.
insisted
Hitler
to
would
call
have
themselves socialists.
not succeeded in today's media-saturated world. It succeeded because of the big Nuremberg trials and because what he was seeing black and white when he watched movies. In today's CNN and today's international, he would immediately, the whole group around him, this ridiculous clown Goering and Goebbels, all these men were mediocre, they were not serious. However, look at the disaster that these mediocre people created. We should never forget
May I
evil.
just one sentence?
Appreciate your time. One sentence, please. We're out of time.
Don't forget, the Holocaust was a top secret thing until the end of the war. It was not the people
Well,
who everybody
that's
knew.
all. That's
And
all the time we have.
Yes,
Thank you all
okay.
for being here. Unfortunately, a debate that can go on, and thank you to our viewers for joining us here in this special edition at i24 News. I'm David Matlin. Have a good night.